And we'll go from there. So today, we're gonna talk about, well, as you can see on the screen, we're gonna talk about property profiles and preliminary reports. That's actually preliminary title report. And we just want to discuss what those are and what you should look for when you're looking for, and you probably already have been, but who knows? This information off of these two items is a must-have for any real estate transaction. So take it back to where we started, not where we started, but where we were a couple weeks ago when we were talking about listings. And so you contact people, you go door to door, you're at an open house, you call somebody on the phone. Whatever your prospect, you get something back from a postcard, whatever your prospecting method is. You're gonna ask them for an address and a name, right? You wanna know how to get a hold of them. You wanna know what the address is. That's what you're gonna need in order to give them information about their property. And the place to start for that, after you've got their name and you've got the property address and things, the place to start is a property profile. Most of you know what a property profile is, or maybe have come across it or something, and I just pulled one up. I blacked out the primary owner so that, so that we didn't have that information out in our training sites and things. But the site address on this property is right here, and it's 23986 Hemlock Avenue, Moreno Valley, California. Here we have the mailing address. Now it happens to be the same one at this point in time, so that tells me that the owner is living at the property. That's it's where the taxes get mailed. That's where everything is. So for the most part, most of the time you can assume that if those two addresses are the same, that it's owner occupied. If by chance this mailing address was separate, gives you a good opportunity to think about contacting somebody who has maybe an investment property on Hemlock, or it could be a secondary property for them, but it tells you that they're not living there. So it gives you a little idea. Maybe it's a landlord. And so the landlord is somewhere else. So if you wanted to contact somebody, you'd still have addresses available. So site address is the property, mailing address is where the owners live. Now, in this document, it goes through and it tells you the different things that it tells you. This is a property, I'll say, there's a cover sheet, there's an overview, there's a history page, there's some comparables. We're gonna go through some of these things right now to just kind of show you and walk you through what it is that you need to look for when you're getting ready to prepare a market analysis. So the owner and geographic information gives us the primary owner. It also tells us the secondary owner. In this case, there is no secondary owner. However, there are many times a secondary owner. Here is the address one more time. It tells you the assessor's parcel number. That's what APN is. And you know that if you take this listing, that's where you get the information to put in your listing, in that little line that wants to know the APN. This is where you get that number. This also tells you a couple of things that we're going to look at in just a couple minutes to help you find the right property. But this one happens to be lot 14 subdivision, Marcy subdivision, Moreno Valley. So it gives us all the basic information. This is the legal brief description. Now, when you get your prelim, it's going to have a more enhanced description of the property itself. It'll tell you where the corners are and things like that. So this one has 2 bedrooms. It has 1 bathroom. It was built in 1953. It has no garage, but it does have a carport that holds up to 4 cars and a fireplace. Now, when you look, and here's the square footage and the lot size. Now, when you look at these things, this information is the information that was recorded. Understand that a property profile comes from public records. So it's information that was recorded and If there are changes made without permits, you could go into a 3-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath or whatever. There could be some discrepancy there. So you have to do some evaluation at that point in time, but this is what was recorded the last time the house went through escrow. The transfer date on this one happened to be September 23rd, 2021. So that's when it was last transferred. Now that transfer could be any number of things. That transfer could be just taking somebody off title. It could be moving it from a personal to a trust, or from a trust to a person. It could be any number of things. It could be refinancing, if there was a cash out refinancing that transferred the entire property or the entire loan and things. So different things can be on here. If you clicked on this, and I can't because it's not live, it's a PDF. But if you click on this, this gives you the actual document numbers. So, and the document numbers means the numbers that are recorded with the county that you're in. This one happens to be Moreno Valley, which is Riverside County. So in Riverside County records, the assigned document, two things that it correlates. The last time the document was changed was in 2021. That's the same thing we saw back here, 2021. And then here's the assigned number to it. So if you ever needed to check on anything, that's where you would go to check on documents for this. The assessed value is 322,524. That assessed value on this one came from the price that they paid for the property on the last transfer. All right, so every time property changes hands, that number is going to be a new number. That's where the taxes come from. Your tax amount on this one is $3870.26 per year, probably divided in half and paid 6 months and 6 months. The way they have divided that out is they assess a land value and they assess an improvement value. So obviously, there's a whole house there. So obviously the improvements are going to come out a whole lot more. You can also think about this when you're thinking, now this doesn't have to be a manufactured, this one doesn't happen to be a manufactured home, but you can think of it in those terms when you do pull a manufactured home. One of the things that the paperwork that you're filling out for your listing asks for, and also when you do your RPA and things, it asks for land value and improvement value. And these percentages will stay pretty much the same. I know this is a dollar amount and a dollar amount, but if this were a manufactured home, then they would be giving this much to the lot value and this much to the manufactured home, if that makes sense to you. All right, tax rate area 21,022. And that information will also come up when you go to down here, your tax bill. Again, if we were live, I could click on this and it would take me to the county taxes, which would have a full breakdown. My tax rate area, and you see this when you drive around to places. You drive around and you see new housing development that says 2% tax rate or 1.5% tax rate or whatever it happens to be. And those numbers are assigned based on the area by the county that you're in and what has to be done to improve it, to get it to where you can build. Now, this was built so long ago that probably didn't even have codes back then. But anyway, you can do a tax rate search and find out what the actual tax rate is on a property. All right, now this one happens to have had a couple of little issues along the way. They took out a loan in 2021. They had a notice of default served on it in July of 2022. Again, you can go over here. If we were live, you could go click on this and you could find out when that happened exactly and what names were involved and things like that. But in this case, they evidently were able to cure the notice of default. And just to back into this for a second, you buy a house and you have a mortgage. And things are going along pretty well, and somebody loses their job, or there's medical issues, or something else, income happens to change. The bank will allow a month or two worth of notices to go out to a person. That's not a notice of default. They'll say, the notice will be that you have fallen behind. We noticed that you didn't make December's payment or whatever it happens to be. And this is the amount, and here are the added fees for being late. And that's just a notice that you'll get. And you'll get a couple of those. That's not a notice of default. That is not a recorded document. Those things go in just to let the owner know that the bank knows that he's not making payments. And it'll have a phone number. Please call so-and-so, talk to us about options, blah, blah, blah. And they'll talk about those things. If the owner doesn't do anything to give them an idea of what they actually can do, and they just move ahead not making payments, then after a certain amount of time, and different lenders have different ideas as to how much time and circumstances that happen in the world, like when we had the pandemic not too long ago, there were a lot of things that moved into this area that a lot of lenders stood back and said, well, we understand, you can't go to work, so you're not making any money, and you don't have other options. And so they didn't waive that payment, but they moved it to the end of the loan. So instead of having a 30-year loan, you might have a 30-year and 2 month, or 30-year and 3 month, or whatever it happened to be. But that required conversation with the bank. If none of that happens and you don't have any conversation with the bank, and the bank doesn't give you some alternatives because you haven't called them, then the next step is for them to serve a notice of default. Now, the notice of default is going to have a dollar amount on it, but you're not defaulting just on that payment. You are defaulting on the loan. So this is a notice of default on the loan itself. And it's the first step legally and recorded that is leading to foreclosure. We kind of call it a pre-foreclosure thing, because the bank now is thinking, hey, you know what? It's been 5 months, 6 months, 3 months, whatever they have on their guidelines, that Loopy hasn't made a payment. And so we need to force this issue. And they force the issue by serving a notice of default that gets recorded. So now the county of, in this case, the county of Riverside, with this document, they know that there's a recorded notice of default. So you have legally been served, right? So now everything's legal, everything's in writing, everything's on paper, everybody knows about it. And it's going to show up as a lien against the property if you turned around and tried to sell it, because now everything is recorded. In this case, obviously, a few months later, and you can see the months here, notice of default was served in July. And by 11, which is November, they have worked out some kind of a loan modification, some kind of a repayment schedule that will allow them to catch up. Now we're back to work, everybody's doing their thing, and so we're back in, now we can afford it again. But the key is conversation with the bank. If I pull this property up and notice of default is where everything started, and this notice of rescission, this is also a recorded document that is done by the lender to show that they are, that the notice of default is being rescinded. They are not moving forward on foreclosure any longer. So there's a notice of rescission. If that notice of rescission doesn't exist and you were only dealing with the notice of default, we potentially could have a problem in selling the property. We would talk to our client then about, have they talked with the bank about curing this? There are different cures that can come about. We're not dealing with many short sales right now. Short sale is a possibility when there's a downturn in the market pricing. Because they took out an adjustable rate mortgage at a cherry pick price of 3%, but after year one, it's gonna go up by 2%, and then after year five, it's gonna be tied to the 11th district treasury funds. So there's different things that they set up adjustable rate mortgages on, and if your property is declining in value, then refinancing becomes an issue. So there's some things that can get in your way. Anyway, so notice of rescission, yay, they were able to pull it out of that pre-foreclosure mode. And you can look through the history here. Not that that's necessarily anything that you need to know about, but when you look at this is transfer date after transfer date after transfer date. New recording number after new recording number. So there's different things that have been done with this property. So this would go on for a lot longer. I didn't load up 5 or 6 pages in here. I just wanted to give you a brief synopsis of what could be listed. All right. Now, the next thing it does is it provides comparable sales data. Now, I want you to be careful about comparable sales data, and I'm going to show you why here in just a second. But it pulls up 1 mile radius from the property itself. Here's the property. It's listed with this little P, and all the others are 1 through what, in this case, 19 looks like. So 1 through 19 things that have sold in the area. And when I say things that have sold, they have nothing to do with comparable square footage, comparable bedrooms and bathrooms. They are simply sales in the area. So comparable is kind of a weird name, but that's what the title companies choose to call it, and that's okay. I'm smart enough to know that a lot of these don't comp the same way. This is where they're all located. You can see where they are in proximity to the property that we're trying to list. And so you can see that they're all pretty close. In fact, they're within a mile. That is the radius that they use. These are the addresses themselves, because it's pretty hard to tell what the address is. If this were live, I could hover over it and it would give me the address. But they give you a number 6. So this is 23675 David Lane. So I know what the property is on there. And then when it goes down here, it says 19 sales, 7405 median lot size. That happens to be the minimum residential lot size in Riverside County, unless you have lenience for 55 plus communities where they're allowed to go smaller. Median living area is 1241. Price range, look at that price range, 257.5 to 581. So now is that comparable for our property? No, it's not. So you can't, that's why I say you can't use all of these, but you can get a little bit of an idea. This is a medium number of 3 bedrooms. Don't know how many of you remember, but ours didn't have 3 bedrooms. If you go back to the front page here, it says here that it has 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And these are all, their median is 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, basically. Year built was 1983. This is the median year built. And ours was 1963. So you can see that there's a 20-year difference in age. And here, even in the age range, it says 41 to 70 with a median age of 42. So that being the case, you can see that these individually or as a group do not exactly comply with what we're trying to use as comps, but that doesn't mean we can't get started that way. Here are the properties listed in a different method, different way. So if you think of ours, and ours was a 2 bedroom, 1 bath. So I scroll over here and I see if there are any others that are 2 and 1. And I can see that there's one right here that sold on Cinnamon Creek Way. 2 and 1. It was 20 years newer, but it had a lot smaller lot size. And it sold for 435. So that one, because it's 2-in-1 and had similar square footage and things, I would probably use that as a comp. I may also use this Whispering Winds Way as a comp. It sold for 420. Square footage and bedrooms and baths were similar and things, so those are numbers that I would use as a comp, but you can see by looking here that a whole lot of these are not comps. This is 4-and-2, sold for 530. This is 4-and-3, sold for 450. This one sold for 525, but it's 3-and-2. And without going through the entire list, you can see that there's only 2 or 3 here that I would actually use for comps when I'm doing comps, but I can still use those because they do identify something that is close. It has sold within the last year and it is similar in size and beds and baths. So I can use some of them, but you can see I can't use all of them. Doesn't make any difference to have all of them there. So this breaks it down even further. And if I want to find the ones that I was looking for specifically, I can look and find those here. It gives you this rundown on all the properties that came up as a potential comp. From there, it goes into some other things that really we don't need for our listing, but we may want to use it if people are asking us questions about things. We may give them phone numbers and addresses and things if they have questions about schools. I might be able to, from here, tell that this is an elementary school and this is another elementary school. I could give them the phone number, and the phone number, they could make that call themselves to find out about the school that they're going to be in. And so those things are available to them and they're available to you, but they don't go on your listing anywhere. And I would never put anything on here that guaranteed that they're going to be in such and such a school, because I've seen streets, and I'm sure you have too, that people on that side of the street go to whatever, Eucalyptus, and people on this side of the street go to Sunnymead Middle School or something. So, and it can be divided by that much, and you might think of one thing, but it actually comes up another. So you can get that information off of here. All right, so I have this property address. And I really don't know where it is. I'm going to be driving around in a little bit of a rural area or whatever. So how do I find out? This map is also downloaded. It is not downloaded with a highlighted this or a number here like this. I wrote this down to, well, I don't write very well, do I? Anyway, I wrote this down. This is the APN that came off of that front page. So how do I find out which property that is? Well, the way I find out is you see the 29218. Okay, that is the map book. That is 29218. So if I didn't have this right here written down, I would look to the front page where it gives the APN and it says 29218. And then I need to look for a specific place. It says 182. All right, so here's 182. And notice here it says 181. So you can see that you can narrow it down further. So I've got 292, 182, and I've got 09. That is a 9. For those of you that can't read script, that is a 9. Anyway, so, and that came off the front page where it gave us our parcel number. So I can find and identify exactly the house that I'm going to. And I know we have other magic and things that, you know, you can pull up Google Earth and zoom in on it and do all kinds of things. But if I'm having trouble finding which property I'm looking for, I just wanted to make sure that you guys could identify how that APN is put together. And so you can back into it however you want to. And this map is downloaded as part of the property profile. All right. So before I go on, are there any questions about the property profile?
Yeah, Terry.
Yes.
This one seems very thorough. But sometimes when you order a property profile from different title companies, it doesn't give you all of this information. Is there a preference on where you should order which company? Like this is Chicago Title. It's very thorough, and I'm looking at a couple of ones from different title companies, two different title companies, and they're very basic, very little information. It doesn't provide all of this.
Sylvia, could you like maybe send me the title company names that you're referring to or something, and I'll research a little bit. The ones that I like to use. And I put this up here just because I put this up here. We have one that we have a kind of a partnership with, and that's All Cal Title. And All Cal Title does a pretty thorough one. It's not in order as much as Chicago Title is, but I can read it. I probably should have put that one up here, but I had this one, and so I just copied it. First American Title and Chicago Title. So All Cal, Chicago Title, and First American are the ones that seem to me, okay, and I'm not very smart, so I have to look for things that are easy. I want something that falls into place and that I can go click, click, just kind of like what you just said, Sylvia. It's like they don't have some of this information. Well, I don't want to have to go do a lot of searching. I want to have it put to me in an order that I can just follow through. And this is one of the best ones. I probably use this one overall in my career. I've probably used Chicago Title. I'm gonna say, and I know it's gonna sound like a strange number, but I've probably used it 80% of the time. And because of the simplicity and because of the way it downloads. First American Title does the same thing, and All Cal Title has one that's pretty similar. Not quite the same, but pretty similar. But there's a lot of others out there. And I'm not gonna throw names out and things because I don't want to get people in trouble, but there are some out there that are kind of like almost little independent title companies. That they're not really. I mean, they have a big name, but they work on kind of a little independent basis. And they don't provide you can get this information, but they don't provide it automatically. This that I put up here today, this is exactly going to chicagotitle.com and clicking on the report, and they'll ask you, first time you do it, they'll ask you your name and your realtor number and stuff like that. But once you have access to this, I don't even have to call the title company anymore. This is what I get. So I just go on it myself, I type in the address, and this is what comes out.
Great.
So
Thanks, Terry.
if you send me a couple of those other, Sylvia, or a couple of ones that you're working with that aren't giving you information, then I can go to their sites or go to their reps and find out if that information is available in some other way.
Okay, will do. Thanks,
Okay.
Terry.
Thank you. Okay. So we've gotten through the profile. This gives us all the information we need to list a property. A couple of the things that we talked about were the name that goes on there, or whether there are secondary owners that also have to be in the room, so to speak, when we get the listing. It'll also tell you if it was in a trust, you could get some trust information and things. So, but right now it tells you who you should be meeting with. And if Terry Ryan calls you and says, could you come out and list this house? And you look at the property profile and Terry Ryan's name is not on there, doesn't mean that Terry Ryan can't do it. It only means that he has to provide an avenue to do it. So what is that avenue? That avenue may be something that says that I'm a trust that says that I'm a successor trustee. It might be a power of attorney that says that I have power of attorney for this. It may be corporation papers that show that I am the signer for this corporation. So this LLC, maybe I am one of the partners in an LLP. We both have signing options. So there's things that can change that But that's the place to start. Oh, I'm talking to Terry Ryan, but it says on here that said, I don't remember the name anymore, but out here somewhere. Says way back up here, it says that the name is, oh, funny me, okay, crossed it out anyway. Says the name is Mr. Black. And obviously Terry Ryan and Mr. Black are two different people. So why? Why am I a different person? Okay, so let's move on to the preliminary title report. And the idea of a preliminary title report is to let everybody know what's going on as far as the property itself. Anything that has been recorded against the property will show up on a preliminary title report. Anything from a loan to tax issues, to easements, to mechanics liens, secondary loans, whatever shows up on this preliminary title report. Now, there's two different ways to get a hold of these. One is that if you have somebody that you're talking to and they say, well, you know, we have these guys are suing us, there's a lien here, we're in bankruptcy, whatever. If they're recorded items, they're going to show up on a prelim. And so it might be wise, I'm not saying you should do it every time, but the title company will do this for you. But they will provide you a listing prelim. Now, the listing prelim is going to tell you about liens and things like that. So you'll know up front how many liens you're having to deal with. A lot of times you only have 2 or 3. You'll always have some, even if you don't have a loan on it. There will be easements from the utility companies and things. You know, we've got this much of the property you can't do anything with. Because we have electric lines, we have gas lines, we have cable, we have whatever. We have running across this part of the property, and so it won't be there. So that tells you about those things. The title company, the preliminary title report is not only guaranteeing that you're transferring a free and clear title, but they are also binding that as an insurance policy. And the insurance policy is saying that they guarantee that there are not loans against it that will not be cleared when we sell it. There are not liens against it that won't be cleared when you sell it. They are guaranteeing that all those things are in place. And they're protecting you as an insurance company. And we've done that. I can't even tell you how many times in our lives that we've had whoever did the prelim, whoever was the title company representing us, go back and have to cover something that they overlooked or didn't get right or something else, and it comes up later on down the road. So it's also an insurance policy. We're clearing the title to make it saleable. And we're ensuring that the work we did was sufficient to make sure that it was clearable. Now, there's 2 different kinds of title policies. One is, hi, how are you? It's okay, you can say hi.
Okay.
Anyway, there are 2 different types of policies that you get. There's ALTA, which is an American Land Title Association. And that one basically, it covers things a little deeper, costs a little more money, but it covers things a little more deeply. There's also an Alta Lenders policy. And people get confused about that, but when you fill out the RPA, you know on the RPA there's a section that says owners, title, and buyers, okay? So what do you mean buyers? Well, they are also doing an inspection, a background check, if you would, to find out if there are things that would cause that buyer to not be able to get a loan. And that's on behalf of the lender. So the lender wants to know that you don't have all kinds of outstanding tax debt, for instance, or you don't have student loans that are way out of hand and you haven't paid anything on them in 5 years or something, wants to make sure that you don't have anything that's recorded, it's going to be checking for that. And that's the lender's policy. If they find something in there that makes you not look like a viable borrower, then they can refuse you based on what this preliminary title report kicks out. All right, so title was vested in whoever that is as joint tenants. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me a couple things. Tells me that I may have more than one name that I have to get signed off when I get the listing and things. And it tells me who has to sign it throughout the transaction. It also tells me if somebody passed away, if one of the joint tenants passed away. Joint tenancy offers, doesn't offer it, it mandates it, is right of survivorship, which means that the title automatically moves to the surviving partner, spouse, whatever it happens to be. So if they're joint tenants, then that one person, as long as they can provide a death certificate and things, is now okay to sign everything. So that's an important thing to know, just because, like I just said, sometimes people pass away. So now it's just, so I just passed to my wife. Okay, I passed away, title passed to my wife. She can do whatever she wants with it at that point in time. I just made a note on here. You can't read my writing probably, but just letting you know that ALTA policies offer broader coverage. They cover a wider range of risks, including zoning violation, encroachment, and survey and boundary issues. They can also be customized with additional endorsements if you have like a really unique property in the middle of nowhere, and they can evaluate it one by one. CLTAs, California Land Title, a lot of people try to go with that just because it's cheaper. But it covers the basics. I mean, it tells you where the property is and it shows you what liens are there. Their main focus is going to be on like forged documents or undisclosed errors or something. Both protect against title defects and potential financial losses. So both of them protect. It's just this one's a little deeper. So remember I told you on that first page, we had like one sentence that gave a brief legal description. That's what it referred to it as, is a brief legal description. So this is actually not a brief legal description. It's interesting here. Tells you exactly the map book to find it in, what pages to go to, records of Riverside County described as, and then it says what its description is. Beginning at the southeasterly corner of said lot 14, thence south 68 degrees. Can you imagine going out and walking this to see where everything is? But you know what? A surveyor, that's what they do. If you have the kind of property, and this one happened to be on a few acres and things, but or acre and a half or something. If you really wanted to know your corners, that's where a surveyor would become involved. And so from a standpoint of writing an offer on something like this, you would use the SWPI, the septic and the well and the propane, and I is for property identification. And so you would fill that out and ask for the property to be surveyed if you didn't know where the corners are. A lot of the properties we sell are in a development of some kind. It's pretty easy to tell where all the property lines are. But when you get out and about, there can be some differences. But this describes it. So when a surveyor is hired to go out there and take care of it for you and find out where your corners are, they're going to pull this. And they're gonna know what all those things are. Then they go out and they set up their little tripods and they have their laser beam things going all over the place. But they are looking for exactly these things. They're setting it to 68 degrees, 15 minutes, 30 seconds. They're setting it for exactly those things. All right. Now section B. So section A was a property identifier. Section B goes through what we talked about just a minute ago, and that's liens. Well, you all know that a tax becomes a lien as soon as you get your little thing in the mail that says you owe taxes for this year. This is taxes for the property. All right, this tax year is 24-25. This is the parcel number. It re-identifies it so you can make sure you're on the right one all the time. First installment is paid. That's terrific. If they pull this up and it's not paid, then that becomes $1,935 less that they're going to get in proceeds. But if they've paid it, it will come up as marked paid. This one is open. So the second installment, which isn't due until April, is actually open at this point in time. So that's okay. If they had this will be the penalty if you pay after April 10th. Pretty healthy penalty, $230. That's a lot of money to pay just because you wrote the check on the 12th instead of the 9th. So anyway, but that tells you whether or not there's taxes that are unpaid. Homeowners exemption, in this case, there's 0 homeowners exemptions, but there are homeowners exemptions that would be written in here. If, for instance, you can get a $7,500 homeowner exemption if there's disabilities, if age is a factor and things like that. So there are some things in there that you can actually get an exemption for a certain amount of money, depending on what the case is. Again, it lists the value of the land and the improvements. Now here, the lien of supplemental taxes, if any, assessed pursuant to and commences. So there's water rights. So these are other things and supplemental to the regular tax thing. You have water rights. So claims to title to water in and under said land, whether or not on specific record. Okay, so you probably in this case have water rights because you have sewer and water in the street. And how do I know those things? I can look down here below and see that there's an easement for provisions for public utilities easement. The easterly 10 feet of said land. So you look at your land, you look at the east side, and 10 feet in from that fence or whatever it happens to be, there is an easement that runs the entire length of that fence, that back property line, whatever it is. And so that will be identified in there. Building setback line as disclosed by Matt Platt. So Matt Platt. Anyway, you probably know what setbacks are, but different cities and different counties require different things. However, 20 feet off of the main road, that's a setback. The front of the house has to be back that far. Maybe 4 feet off of you've all seen those properties, you drive by and you go, good grief, look, you can shake hands out the bedroom windows because they look like they're so close things. They actually have to be 4 feet on each side. And that's the wall. That's not necessarily the overhang of a roof, which makes them look so close sometimes because that overhang might be another foot or something like that. But they actually have to be 4 foot back. So this is actually saying that those things are in place the way they're supposed to be. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So there may be, and there aren't in all cases, but there are some builders that put properties in place, and there are certain covenants, not HOA covenants, so don't get the two of them mixed up. There are covenants and restrictions as far as how big the house has to be when you build it there, and that's trying to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. And so maybe it's, who knows? Maybe they don't want yellow paint. They don't want to match my shirt because everybody else is beige or everybody else is light gray or whatever it happens to be. It has to be 3,000 square feet or whatever that happens to be, because they can say that in subdividing these, the city or the county required that we have this size lot and this size home. And so those can be written into covenants and restrictions, and they would be set in place here if there were any of those. All right. An easement for the purposes shown below, therefore affecting a portion of land. And here it says purpose is public utilities. And we just read about that up here. So what are the public utilities? Well, there's an easement for California Electric Power Company. And that was recorded in 1956. So, and you remember the house was built in 63. So it's been around a long time. There was another easement put in place. This one was put in place in June, and evidently that didn't take care of all the needs, so they had to get another partial added to it in August, which is okay. They can do that when they're building homes and things. Okay, there's a deed of trust to ensure or to secure the indebtedness. Okay, so this is what the bank, excuse me. This is what the bank loaned on the property. And they secured a note of indebtedness of this amount, $279,600 in March of 2006. And here's the recording number. Again, you could go look at it for official records purposes, but this is the bottom line is you need to know this thing. There's a deed of trust. Now, I don't know how long. This one says dated March 2006, so probably 2,000 or 279,000 is not the amount owed anymore, because hopefully they've made payments along the way. But this tells you where it all started. So you know this lien has to be cleared. Whatever the balance is at this point in time, escrow will find out when it's in escrow. And they will send something to Express Capital Lending that is a payoff. And the Express Capital Lending will say, well, the payoff on this note is now 105,000 or whatever it happens to be. And that'll be the amount that will have to be taken out of proceeds to cover whatever Express Capital Lending says is their payoff. All right, so as we go down, we can go through these different things. Here's this was an earlier, this is going through the history a little bit, but they evidently had a second at one time of 40,500 in June. And that was transferred to another, whoever Western Progressive LLC is. So whoever had the initial $40,000, they sold it to Western Progressive, but it's still an amount that is showing up as a lead. The beneficiary is Washington Mutual, so it went from one to the other, but it's still a lien. How much of that is due? I don't know, because June 1st, 2006, it may be completely paid off and they just haven't released it, or there may be a small balance left, but it's going to come out of proceeds. So I know as these things rat them up, I can ask people about them. And let's see, they also have a HELOC that they took out, which is a home equity line of credit. We don't know how much they pulled out or whether the loan is paid in full or whatever. But notice here it says we will place a hold on file until we can confirm the loan is paid in full and account is closed. So this is what the title company and escrow is looking to do. They will not transfer title if there are these little instruments that have been recorded and there's still money owing on them. Okay, there was a lien for unsecured property taxes filed by the tax collector. So it looks to me like in the fiscal year 21-22, that was the same time, if you remember, that they weren't making payments on their house and they were served a notice of default. So probably some things didn't get paid because the bank wasn't getting any money, so they weren't paying out any money because maybe their taxes were part of an impound or something. So we don't know what that is, but we know that there's a possible holdup. Now, I don't think a deal would be held up for $273, but it still has to be cleared. And then they did something else they had an abstract of judgment, which basically means that somebody else that they borrowed money from, Resurgence Capital LLC, of $25,588, and any other amounts due thereunder. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I need one of those buttons that the radio guys have that they can push if they have to cough. Or I just need to not cough. We'll have to figure that out. But anyway, so this is a company they're also going to have to get in touch with to try to make amends. Okay. This is just kind of a wrap up. And so it doesn't really refer to anything that you have to worry about. I think you guys are witnessing me dying, so let's keep record of this. Good thing it's being recorded. All right, it has wiring instructions on here. So this wiring instructions are gonna have to do with what the title company has to do. This is a single family residence. Good funds law. And let me just explain to you that the way, you probably know this, but the way a standard deal works where there's a loan involved. Everybody goes through their credit checks, everybody goes through, they get their cash together that they need to close for closing costs and down payment and all those things. Those funds go into escrow. The lender's funds, whoever the lender is that you're borrowing the money from, when title tells them that everything is clear, then they wire the money to title. So it doesn't go to escrow, it goes to title. So the funds to close, like down payment and other costs, escrow fees and things like that, that goes into escrow. And the rest of it gets wire transferred. So this is an explanation of wire transfers. It also tells you the same kind of things that we know. And that is that wire transfer takes a day, or depending on when you get it in there. If you get it in there after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then the transfer isn't complete until the next business day. So that's why it's talking about things like next business day availability or second business day availability. These are the periods that are required by the title company. They won't release the money to escrow until they know that everything is cleared and the bank has its funds in place and those funds have cleared. So once that has all happened, then they can send the money to escrow for disbursement, or they, and as well as they pay off the loan balance of any of the loans that are in place. They pay off the liens, they pay off all of those things prior to having it go to escrow. And then whatever's left gets wired to escrow. And that's where all the disbursements come from. Okay, this is just, and we talked about this before. This is the land, this is the CLTA instead of the ALTA. And it just tells you the things that are excluded from coverage. So it's just, this is just for you to know. We don't have to go through it piece by piece, but it's a good thing for you to know. All right. So we finished up profiles, we finished up prelims. Do we have any questions at this time since it's almost 11? Well, no questions. Everybody's good.
No questions.
All right, perfect. Everybody knew all this stuff anyway, and we didn't even need to do this class, right?
No, it was it's good refreshers.
Well, it is an important.
Good stuff, Terry.
And by the way, the buyers are gonna have to sign off on this in escrow. It's part of their escrow package. And so they will read all of this information too. But you need to read through it when they come out just to see if there's anything that you think is going to hold up your ability to close this on time. Because if there's a lot of little things on there, some of these, I've seen some of these literally where people have, they've got mechanics liens against them, which means that they didn't pay for some construction work that was done. I've seen them where they were held up for tax liens. I've seen them held up for spousal support, and whatever was filed in the courts gets recorded by the court and is given a document number, a recording number, just like this. Each one of these things that are in here right now have a number. This one's 256,143. This one happens to be 308,966. But they are all recorded, so they are all going to show up on a prelim. And if there are any of those others that I just mentioned a minute ago, child support payments, and people miss child support payments all the time. I understand that. Or spousal support or something. Just missing it doesn't change the prelim. Missing it and having it go to an attorney who files it and files a lien against the other person for it. That's when it becomes that's when it becomes an item on your prelims. So when they show up there, then it's all recorded. People know about it. It has to be cleared prior to closing. If somebody doesn't make a spousal payment along the way, if it was never filed for and never recorded, it's not going to show up on here. That's just going to be something that other people have to live with. So it's recorded items. That's what's going to come on here. And so it's just important to review those just to make sure that you don't see anything that's really going to jump up and bite you at the end. That's the important thing about it. So with that in mind, I guess we'll let you all go to work. And I think we have a class tomorrow or something, but
I have a question. I'm not
go
gonna
ahead,
let
Lydia.
you easy. Right where you were just looking on the deed of
Uh-oh.
trust. On the deed of trust where it says
Sure.
279.6, and then below it, remember the 40,000, the deed of trust secure as indebtedness in the amount shown up below. Now, I just wanted to make sure if I can decipher whether that may be either a deed of trust rectifying something, or is it a second?
Yeah, and the only way, that's what the title company is gonna determine, but in this case, just because of who it's through. And the fact that they are a trustee group and things, and Washington Mutual Bank, they're not even in business anymore now. Chase has taken them over or something, so more than likely. If they go to Chase and find out what the situation is, or they go to Group 9 Inc., a Pennsylvania corporation, they're gonna find out that it was just borrowed money that somebody put a lien on the property for.
Okay, so it's not really a second, it's just a lien of,
Just an equity
Wow.
lien that uses part of the house as collateral.
would it say a second if it's a second?
No, not
blatant-
not necessarily, no.
So how would I know? Oh,
Usually,
no, title needs to know.
yeah, that's it. That's what I was gonna say. The only thing we need to know is that there's potential for something. And
Okay,
then title's the one that needs to figure out how to clear that.
okay, thank you.
Okay, of course.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
Thanks for everything. It's a good
Oh.
refresher.
That's good. We need those. Oh, I just saw it here in the chat that there is a class tomorrow. It's on objection handling. So there you go.
Right,
It's magic how these things pop up. I have magic things on the computer that happen all the time. I have magic things at home. I have this basket in my, this basket, wicker basket type thing in our master bathroom. And you know, I throw clothes in there and a day or two later, they're hanging in my closet. I don't understand. It's just magic. So same thing here. Talk to you guys soon. Have fun. Have a good day.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Terry. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye. Lucy, are you still on there? Must be on the phone or something. I need to talk to her. So.